Welcome to the Tough Decisions Daily Show with your hosts, Dan and Danae Hanford. As entrepreneurs and real estate investors, we are faced with tough decisions on a daily basis. These tough decisions can either make us or break us. On this show, you will hear from highly successful people sharing their stories behind tough decisions that they have had to make along their journey of success. In every episode, you will be able to learn from the thought processes behind the tough decisions that were made. Some of these decisions will have amazing outcomes, and some not so much. So without further ado, your hosts, Dan and Danae.
Welcome to the show today. You're on the Tough Decisions podcast with Dan and Danae. Today we have on our show Ryan McKenna. Ryan's a successful business owner and experienced real estate investor active in the multifamily apartment space. He's invested in over 25 real estate and business syndications worth over $200 million. Real estate investing has always been a passion of his, and he's fascinated by the concept of creating passive income to achieve financial independence and is looking to help others do the same. He's currently an investor in several apartments and commercial properties in some large markets such as Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Atlanta, Albuquerque, Portland, Minneapolis, Phoenix, Memphis, and Juneau, Alaska. At McKenna Capital, Ryan oversees all capital raising efforts, acquisitions, and investor relations. He prides himself on building long-term relationships with his investor partners while providing great customer experience. He lives in Glenview, Illinois with his wife and two daughters. Ryan, thank you for joining us today. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about how you got into real estate and why you like it so much? You said, you're passionate about those investments in the real estate because of the freedom that it gives you. So how did you get there?
First off, thanks, Dan and Danae. Really excited to be on your show and just to dive into real estate and kind of what's led up to this point. So I'd always, been fascinated with creating wealth and doing it in a passive way where, you're making money when you're sleeping and haven't found a better way yet than real estate to do that. And so I guess it all started back when I was in college reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That really kind of gave me, the blueprint to really go ahead and try to chase that. And so I've always been someone that's really interested in learning and building things. And so real estate investing just seemed like a fun way to do it passively and kind of create that proverbial snowball effect. And once you kind of get in there and start doing it, you kind of get addicted to kind of keep growing the portfolio. And so I did my first multifamily syndication about 3 years ago. And I guess I would say this is probably been 15 years in the making. I'd been studying, reading, and just always wanting to do it. And finally was in a position to pull the trigger and did it with someone who I highly respected, and ended up doing my first of 5 deals with a syndicator out west, and that kind of really got me started and really was able to see kind of the possibilities and the great benefits to real estate investing.
Well, and in this path that you've taken and going, full on with the multifamily syndication and multifamily, real estate investing, just maybe pick out 1 or 2 decisions that you've had to make along the way that you would say were kind of tough decisions, maybe even prior to before you even got into multifamily or even real estate in general that maybe brought you to this point. But what are some of the tough decisions that you've had to face along this path that you've been taking?
Okay. So I guess to take you back to when I was in college, because this really kind of sets the framework for my entrepreneurial spirit and just where I am today, what really is driving me. So I went to Arizona State on a baseball scholarship. This was my dream baseball school. For those that aren't familiar, it's one of the top Division I schools in the country for baseball. And worked so hard to get there. When I was 12 years old, wrote down on a piece of paper my goals and was able to actually achieve it, which, to this day, I still kind of look back on in awe just because I was able to play with a lot of, great players. And, one thing that, happened to me along the way was end of my sophomore year. And, I was playing at the time at Arizona State and, was really, getting close to that next level where my dream was always to play in the big leagues. And I ended up having to pull myself out of a game. We were playing Stanford and, just, was not feeling normal, never done something like that before, but I just knew something was wrong. And it really was the first time where, I was kind of shaken and didn't know what was going on. And it was a scary time in my life. And ended up having to go into the hospital. I called my uncle, who's a doctor, kind of explained my symptoms. And he was like, you're going to go to the emergency room right away. And initially they thought I had leukemia. And as you can imagine, trying to work, so hard to build something, to put yourself in a position, you kind of feel like, oh, I'm at the top of the world. And then all of a sudden, everything is just literally taken away from you. And I got diagnosed with ITP, the blood platelet disorder, and spent about 6 months in and out of hospitals. And this was the time in my life where, all the doctors telling me you're never going to play baseball again, your career is over. And it was a crushing moment for me. And I just remember, all I could do sitting in a hospital bed was read books. And I was really determined that, I was going to try and get back out on the field and play again. But I also, knew that, realistically, I had to start thinking about, what else I was going to do in life and where kind of my next path was going to be. And that's really when I started getting into real estate investing. I was reading every book out there on it. And I just was fascinated about trying to create kind of a lifestyle and that passive income that I think a lot of us try to go chase. And I told myself that if I can't do it in baseball, I'm going to do it in the business world. So that's really what drove me to get into real estate. And it just took a while until I got to the point financially where I could actually do some of these investments. But that really was the driving force back then and still drives me today. And I wake up every morning and I'm just really excited and energized about the day and kind of what I have, on my plate. It feels like, I was given a second chance now that everything has been fine. I was able to come back at the end of my junior year, ended up having to do a red shirt, and I came back on the field again and was able to play, but had to really, give up baseball at the end of my senior season when I graduated. And that was just a tremendously tough decision because I didn't want to give it up. I wanted to chase my dream, but at that point, my health, was more important than going to try and play pro baseball. So knowing that I had to do that, and I just felt like I could, had one of two options. I could kind of look at it negatively and dig myself in a hole and say, why me? And just always feel sorry for myself. Or I could turn it into something positive and look at it as a blessing. And that's what I chose to do because, I look at perfect, baseball metaphor, sometimes life throws you curveballs, and it threw me one. And it wasn't something I had planned for, but I was able to fall back on my education and, kind of my business, pursuits. And I feel like, now I'm in a position that I'm thankful. I feel like everything happens for a reason. And I was able to get this opportunity to get into the business world maybe a little bit sooner and, just really happy with where things are at. But it was definitely something that I couldn't have done without great family support, and just, friends were great through that whole process because it was a really trying time in my life, and one that is a defining moment in who I am as a person. And it's why I try to get the most out of every day and live life to the fullest. And I'm over kind of the initial shock of having that, kind of be the moment in my life that I look back on as, like I said, I wouldn't be here today doing the things I'm doing if I didn't have that kind of obstacle that came my way at the end of my sophomore year in college.
Are you still, seeking treatment for the blood disorder?
I'm not. I mean, every 3 or 4 years, I'd go in and get a blood platelet count just to make sure my blood platelets are up to normal levels. And that was really what was driving, my blood platelet count so low, was just having, some issues in my immune system. And they ended up having to do a splenectomy. And that ended up curing everything. But I still have to monitor it. I'm 100% healthy. It just, not having a spleen, I'm more susceptible to, getting sick, I guess. So try to eat healthy, work out, stay in good shape, and all is good.
How important would you say that tough decision was in going from baseball and those pursuits to what you're doing now, and your family and your friends and what they were saying to you, and that encouragement and that motivation from their side of things? How important was that?
Like I said, I couldn't do it without them. I mean, there were some dark moments where, I almost died. I mean, I thought my life, was ending, and I had to keep telling myself that, what, I'm gonna get through this, figure out a way. And I had to lean on others when those were those days that I'd just be sitting in a hospital bed for a week straight, not knowing, am I going to live the rest of my life in this condition, or is this something that will go away? Will the surgery help me? And then just having the doctors tell me, you're done with baseball, your dream's over. And just having others to talk, through that situation with, and knowing that, baseball isn't everything in life, and that others said, hey, you'll be successful. And, you put your mind to something else, you'll have just as much success, maybe more. And so it really opened me up to seeing other things out there. And at the time, one of my teammates, his dad was a multifamily syndicator. And that's really when I started learning about, what this great business was all about. And he kind of became like a mentor to me early on and would send me books. And so I would be reading these books when I was in the hospital. And it just, the encouragement and the support from others really kind of, led me to where I am today. And he was the first syndicator that I ended up investing with and doing 5 deals with. So I feel like I mentioned, everything happens for a reason, and you just try and make the most of it. When you get knocked down, you get right back up and you just keep pushing forward.
So Ryan, you made this decision to get into real estate while you were in college and still playing baseball, but it was several years before you could actually act on that. So what would you tell our listeners who maybe have that as a goal? They want to be in real estate. Maybe they want to be specifically in the multifamily market. What are some steps that they can take, even though they might not be able to get into it full on right now? What can they do to get themselves into the position where they can be an investor or they can be a syndicator?
So what I would tell them, and this is based upon, what I've done, is I love learning. I love, reading, and I just would go out there and try and seek as much information as you can, whether it be books, podcasts, blogs, and then also be out there building relationships, because you just never know when that opportunity is going to come along. And if you've got, solid background, you've got a great understanding, what you want to do, but you might just not be in a position financially to pull the trigger. I mean, someday, if you work hard enough and you're smart about some of the decisions you make, I really believe that you can be in that position, and you'll know when it comes around, and you'll be able to capitalize on it. And so, even though it was hard, and I kept talking about, I want to get into real estate. I feel like people were like, well, when are you going to do it? And it just took a while, but that helped me prepare my mind. So when the right opportunities came around, I could jump on it. I knew right away that this was a good deal. And so the timetable is tough. I mean, sometimes opportunities come right away. Sometimes they take, a longer horizon, but I think just being ready and aware and having some solid, knowledge behind it, you'll be able to make some good decisions and, get into the investing world when it's appropriate for you.
Obviously, since you've gone into this multifamily space, there's been some other tough decisions that you've had to make. Can you think of another tough decision now that you've been in the multifamily space that you've had to make, and the outcome of that and the lessons you learned from it?
Yeah, so another tough decision, let's see, it was probably about 4 or 5 months ago. I was, just went through the busiest year of my life. And let's see, I had my second daughter. I started an MBA program at the University of Notre Dame, had a full-time job, and was still pursuing real estate. And at that point, I was doing it more passively, where I was investing in other syndications. But I started to kind of head down a path where I was looking to do, more active syndications, where I had played a bigger role and where I was out trying to find the opportunities and put the capital together. And I started to go down that path, and I found myself feeling like, wow, I'm kind of taking on too much, and I just don't know, if this is right, and was thinking about my family and just everything else I had on my plate and what I was doing. And I just knew that, the time it would take, and I couldn't probably keep up that pace. And so I had to, make a tough decision to kind of pull back and say, you know what, the active real estate right now is just probably not the best move for me. And even though I wanted to do it so bad and I was super passionate about it, I really had to kind of take a step back. And so when I did that, I made a decision. I felt better, kind of taking a little bit off my plate. And then I had this opportunity come out of nowhere where, my mentor and coach, Dave Thompson, he had reached out to me shortly after I made this decision to not, pursue, things on my end actively, but it was an opportunity that seemed very passive in nature, but I could still achieve and do all the things I wanted to do from a real estate investing perspective. And this was a model I didn't even realize was out there. And it was actually the role I was going to play, my own business with McKenna Capital. I had a few other partners out there that were looking for deals, and I was going to be the one to kind of bring in the capital. And I knew, from investing in the deals, which ones would be good ones that others would have interest in. And so I talked with my wife just about this opportunity. I got a call one day, and it just seemed to be, one of these opportunities that I felt really good about, and it seemed to align with, with what I wanted to do. And I was able to cut out all the other things that I didn't want to do in a real estate investing business. And so it was a great model, and it seemed like I could kind of hit the ground running. And it was another, tough decision, because I just told my wife that I was going to, kind of slow down a little bit. And I didn't know how she was going to take this. And it was tough, because I felt so good about it, and I knew I could do well with it. But I didn't want to, make the decision without her. And so I thought about it for a few days. I actually told Dave initially I couldn't take on anymore. I mean, I was very upfront with him. I said, hey, I got to finish, my MBA. I'm 4 months away. Just, once I get done with that, I'll have more time on my hands. And talked to my wife about it. And I was, very impressed with, just the way she kind of broke it down and thought about it. And in a way, I was, she was very, very supportive. And she looked at the two and said, you were going on this path that was, from an active, real estate investor perspective, from a syndication standpoint, you're going to be having to, do all the financing, you're going to find the deal. I mean, there's just a lot more responsibility that comes with that, and much more time consuming. And then here was this opportunity that, like, I could basically, continue investing in real estate, but then also, reach out to my investors, others that had shown interest in what I was doing, and help, provide them with opportunities to invest and play like a capital, raising role with other syndicators who are already out there, finding the deals, putting the deals together. And so from a time standpoint, it was minimal and would allow me to still kind of have the same things that I wanted from a real estate investor standpoint. And my wife said, I think this path is, it's a lot easier. And actually, I think you'd be more successful and happier doing this. And I said, appreciate you sharing that with me, because I was kind of thinking the same thing. And knowing that I had her support, and after talking with her about it for a few days, I called back Dave. I said, you know what, let's do this. And, I haven't looked back yet. It's been a fun ride, and it was a tough ride, because although it was a lot less work, I still had a lot on my plate, but we ended up doing very well my first month. We had 4 deals that we put together, 2 in the multifamily space, 1 in mobile home park space, the other 1 in self-storage. And I ended up raising over $2 million out of the gate. So I was really excited and very grateful for the investors, but it was just one of those, moments where I had to kind of, initially I thought I was losing, an opportunity to kind of go and build McKenna Capital. And when I took a step back, another opportunity came along, which was even better. And it was one that fit with, what I had going on in my life. And it was one that I, had to talk with my wife extensively about. And when I had a lot of the support and the encouragement, it gave me more energy, and it really helped me. And so I'm thankful that kind of went through that. And it's been something that's been very successful early on.
How long ago did you make that decision?
That was about, 4 months ago.
So 4 months ago. And have you finished the MBA?
Yes, I finished about 2 weeks ago. So, yeah.
Well, that must be exciting. I mean, you're able to do both things, raising this capital as well as finishing the MBA and accomplishing both goals.
Yeah, it was very exciting, and it didn't seem like work to me, because I was really enjoying what I was doing. And then I was, in a great program at Notre Dame, and just had a ton of support there, obviously with my wife and family. And so I knew that was going to be coming to an end relatively soon. And I figured, I could make this work. I'll do whatever it takes, in that short window where I was, essentially launching this new business and finishing up school. And I'm so glad I did it, because when I look back on it, I don't think this opportunity would have been here today had I not jumped on it back then, just because of how things have, quickly evolved and, the success we've had. I'm thankful that it happened the way it did. And now I've got a lot more time on my hands that I don't have, my nights and weekends taken up with school. So it's a good place, that I'm in right now. And I'm very, I feel very energized and refreshed and really focused in on, continuing to build this.
So Ryan, what would you tell our listeners? Is there something that you feel like you are able to repeat or to do every time you face a tough decision to help you make that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I typically like to do when I face a tough decision, I like to go to a place where I can just clear my mind and there's no distractions. And usually that's while I'm working out, or I'll go on a long bike ride. And what I try to do is, when I'm facing a tough decision, I want to get clear on what I really want and what's best for me and my family. And so I try to go through and visualize the situation and really kind of think ahead of what the impact's going to be. And then I'll look at all the pros and cons, what's worst case, best case scenario. And if there's going to be some risk involved, I would like it to be calculated risk, because I know not everything's a guarantee, but if I can kind of stack the chips in my favor, then, I feel better about that. I mean, after I've kind of had that, that moment to myself where I'm able to really get clear on what I want, I'll go and talk with my wife or my partners, my family, and I want to get their perspective before I share kind of what I think. I want them to hear it, because I think it's very important to hear and see things from, through different lenses, because other people will have different viewpoints on it. And so once I get that, then I'm able to have kind of that conversation, like the one I had with my wife, where I was like, yeah, you know what, I was actually kind of thinking the same thing. And it was really good to have that validation. And so after, I do that, and whether it's with my wife, my partners, you got to take action. I mean, that's the last thing. I mean, I'm that type of person that sits around and mulls things for too long. I mean, once I feel good about it and I know I've done my due diligence, then I take action. And I think that is probably one of the most important steps, because a lot of people will talk about things, but they, might not ever do them. And I was one of those, when I talked about real estate investing for so long, I just felt like, one of these days I got to pull the trigger, and it just happened to be the right time for me when it happened. And I'm glad I did it. But, everyone kind of has their own, time frame for doing things. But I think the most important thing is after you've had time to think about the decision and reflect on it, then you got to take some sort of action to either, say no or say yes, and go all in and be fully committed to it.
Right. And I think that's actually one of the things that sort of is a marker of a successful entrepreneur or successful investor, is that when they do make the decision, then they just act on it, and they don't, worry about the consequences so much. Those will just come as that decision develops. Do you have a book that you would recommend for our listeners? Maybe something that has helped you in your journey or, in your decision making?
Yeah, there's a book that I've read several times, and it's one that I, reflect on often. It's called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, and it's basically, the disciplined pursuit of doing less. And it's a great book. It was a great book for me because I had a lot on my plate. And as an entrepreneur, I know you guys operate a lot of different businesses. You really got to focus in on what's critically important and where, most of your value is coming from, like the Pareto principle. And then the things that are non-essential, just get them off your plate, say no, and you'll free up a lot of your time and energy to focus on the things that matter most. And so this is a book that, I've tried to design, the way I operate my businesses through this. And it's really been helpful because it helps me, get a clear mindset and then get rid of the things that, are going to just suck up time, because I don't have all this extra time to just waste on things that aren't important. And so I try to tackle the hardest things, the biggest projects early in the morning, because that's when I'm most active and most creative. And so try to start each day with knocking down a few, tough things. And then the rest of the day just seems to kind of flow much easier. So that would be a great book I'd recommend to anyone that maybe has a lot going on in their lives and they want to simplify it, but they want to get really focused on, decisions that they make that are going to drive the biggest value.
And shifting gears here a little bit, what would you say is the most exciting thing that you have done or purchased or whatever with the money that you've made up to this point in your life?
So being a big baseball fan, diehard Cubs fan, the most exciting time of my life was in 2016. I was able to take my family went to 3 Cubs World Series games. And it was actually through my ticket business that I have. I had Cubs season tickets. And, was able to take my brother, my dad, my mom, my wife, and it was just an awesome time in our lives. And then to top it off, took my dad to Game 7. We drove down to Cleveland, and it was probably the greatest sporting event in my entire life that I'll ever, be a part of. And to share that with my dad was just, it meant so much. And it was just one of those experiences that, I'll remember for the rest of my life. And I was so glad that was a decision, when they won Game 6 that I would say was a great decision, to go down, and it would have been tough to make the trip. And if they lost, it'd have been tough to swallow, but it was worth going down there to see history. And I couldn't have done it with, anyone else other than my dad. And it's just was something I'll cherish forever. And
well, I know
probably the best.
I was going to say, as a longtime Cubs fan, I'm sure that was very, very exciting. And I'm sure that as a Cubs fan, that was probably your number one item on your bucket list. So, the next question I'm going to ask you is about the next item or the number one thing on your bucket list right now. So obviously that was one thing that was probably on your bucket list and now is passed. And that's great. That's exciting. I have a lot of friends that are longtime Cubs fans and they didn't think they'd ever see that. But what's the number one thing on your bucket list right now?
Funny you ask. I was just talking to my wife about this the other day, and we both love traveling to New Buffalo, Michigan. It's kind of our little getaway. It's about an hour and 15 minutes from Chicago, and we were actually just up there recently, and we were talking, someday it'd be nice to have a vacation home on the beach there. And so that is now moved up to the top priority on the bucket list, and it's something that, through real estate investing and just what I'm doing, locked in full time working there. It's another goal of ours that we're going to, work towards. And hopefully in the next few years, we'll be able to find a, beautiful home on the beach there in New Buffalo, Michigan.
Well, that's exciting. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to be on the podcast with us today. How can the listeners reach out to you if they want to get some more information from you, if they want to maybe, find out some more information about how to invest with you, or how can they, ask you questions to kind of follow up from the podcast?
They can go to mckennacapital.com if they want to check out the website, see kind of what we're working on. But if they want to email me directly, it's just ryan@mckennacapital.com. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, share any insight. And that'd be the best way for your listeners to reach out to me or to be kept in the loop on anything that we're working on.
Okay. Well, thank you again so much, Ryan, and look forward to having you on some future episodes.
All right. Well, thanks, Dan and Danae. I really appreciate the opportunity here. It was an honor to be on your show, and look forward to staying in touch.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to nominate a highly successful entrepreneur or real estate investor to be a guest on this show? Email us at dan@toughdecisions.net. Help us by spreading the word about our show with your friends. And also take time right now to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or your favorite platform. You've been listening to The Tough Decisions Show.